People say I talk about some weird stuff, some far out stuff. But how about that chair that you're sitting in isn't solid? How weird is that? This reality is nothing like we think it is.
When I saw what Icke is doing, I was a bit jealous of him. Wow, look at what this guy's doing.
I don't know if anybody else could do it but him, actually.
We are in a period now where speaking your truth is not just important, it's utterly crucial to where humanity goes from here. The world needs renegades.
The man himself is here with me today. David Icke, welcome to the Infinite Fringe, sir.
Thank you, mate. Real pleasure.
But pleasure to be talking to you. Like I told you, and I'm sure you get this a lot, but you are one of the main reasons, and there's three of them, and you're one of them that I am here today doing this. It's insane, but thank you. I want to thank you for that, sir.
It's a pleasure. I mean, it's the point of doing it, really, and you know what drives you on is when you do see that people have been awakened by the information and your efforts to see the world as it really is. Because the more people that see it, the more other people are going to see it as it starts to circulate. And for a long time, obviously, I've been on this road now for 30 years. For a long time, no one wanted to know, and I was the national crazy man of Britain, laughed at wherever I went, and there's been just an amazing transformation in the way that people look at me. I mean, the number of times I get stopped in the street now, not just in Britain but around the world, with people who a lot of them would formerly have laughed with everyone else years and years ago, but now are talking seriously about the information. It's been a real transformation, and gives you a real buzz when you see that.
Yeah, absolutely, and you've earned it, man. But everything. I have a ton of your books, and so many things that you said in your books back then seemed like maybe I mean, I can see it happening, but nah, and then it actually comes to pass. It's the credibility thing that has kept you along, to be honest, 100. But listen, I want to talk to you about this artificial thing we got going on here.
Right.
We have a problem, I feel, and I know you feel the same way. The Pentagon has recently unveiled new technology. They're calling it the Jetson technology, where they can read the signature of your heart.
Yeah.
And it's like facial recognition is going to be obsolete because of this, But this is as far as we've gone now. This is going to be the thing where we have zero privacy. It's admitted at this point, but we're building a prison for ourselves. Like you've said many times, that we're doing it willingly. We're laying out the bricks for our own prison, and we don't realize it. And I'm afraid of what's going on here, David.
Well, we need to connect the dots to see the picture, creating any picture. A television picture is a series of dots. If you only saw the dots, you'd see, what the heck is this? But when you step back and you see the dots joined, you say, whoa, I can see what it is. It's a picture, and it's this or it's that. And it's the same with researching this. There's lots of people who research particular areas, and so do I. It's why I'm up with the sun every morning and all day, because there's so many subjects to research. But if you only research some of them, you see something different about a dot. It's not the way we were told this situation was or this subject was. But when you research across the spectrum of subjects, that's when the whole picture begins to appear. And this whole thing with technology, you can see it as a modern, suddenly out of nowhere phenomenon. Or you can look at it in a very different way. You can go back to ancient times, and you can pick up a force, in the end, ultimately not human, which works through networks of secret societies and satanic groups that put people into power, and have done all through this period of thousands of years that I'm talking about. And the idea from the start was to enslave humanity totally and utterly, completely, and to assimilate human consciousness into itself. So the first thing you need to do, or the foundation thing you need to do, is to centralize power in the world. The more you have diversity of decision making, the less control you're going to have to dictate what's happening everywhere. So we started off in tribes, and the tribal peoples made decisions about what happened in the tribe. Then lots of tribes were brought together, and we called them countries. Now a small group at the center of the country is dictating to all the former tribes. In the European Union now, we have the countries brought together under an even fewer number of people that are dictating to all the former countries and therefore all the former tribes. You have the trading groups of these economic trading pacts, and what we call globalization, which is simply a word for what I'm describing, the incessant centralization of global power in every area of our lives. So that is now well advanced, where fewer and fewer people are having power over more and more people. Alongside that, you need to control the whole foundation of human control, which is human perception. Everything that people do, what they challenge or don't challenge, support or don't support, whatever, comes from their perception of that situation. So then you ask, where does perception come from? It comes from information received. It doesn't matter if it's a personal experience or what you've seen on the news or what you've seen on Facebook. It's an amalgamation of information received, which you then process into a perception, which becomes your behavior. So key to this sequence is controlling information. So we have seen the creation of the media, the increasingly global nature of major media, which has led to the internet, which I can come to in a second in relation to this whole technological thing. And the internet was created by DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon. That's why we have the internet, because of DARPA, a deeply sinister organization that gives us wonderful gifts to humanity, like death rays and ways to target specific genotypes with weaponry of various kinds and chemical weapons. So the process of controlling information came first of all from obviously newspapers, and then newspapers got bought up by more and more of these corporations, so fewer and fewer people were controlling more and more newspapers. Then we came into the radio and the television era, and as the years have passed, so these corporations have got control of more and more of the radio stations, more and more of the TV stations, and more of the newspapers. And now the newspapers are increasingly becoming obsolete, because the big move, going back to DARPA, was to move the information and the circulation of information onto the internet. And once it's on the internet, the reason they want that is because then it can be controlled algorithmically in terms of what people see and what people don't see. This is why we've got the explosion of censorship now with Facebook and Google and Twitter and all these other people. And they're doing it algorithmically because they can, because it's on the internet, it's digital, it's electronic. Now, coming alongside another, shall we say, dot, has been the development of technology. And a lot of people don't realize that these major internet giants and virtual monopolies like Google and Facebook are not just social media platforms and search engines. They are big time into high technology based on artificial intelligence. In fact, what they do is based on artificial intelligence. So as this other dot, the technology, came alongside, it seems that it's just come out of nowhere. At the same time as Facebook and the internet and Google came out of nowhere, this technology called smart technology came out of nowhere. Well, it didn't. None of them came out of nowhere. It's all been planned from the shadows, and it's all connected. So then you go back to this force in the background, which ultimately is not human, has known about this technology that we call smart, which is like cutting edge and whoa, look at the latest thing, for thousands and thousands of years. It's not coming from the human timeline. It's not coming from the human sequence of events and sequence of technological understanding. But if you start introducing smartphones and smart technology to a human race at the time that was knocking rocks together, well, they're not going to be able to use it, are they? So this force has been, through its secret society network, been developing the human mind so it becomes intelligent enough to build its own prison, as you rightly mentioned, but not wise and with a consciousness expanded enough to see that that's what it's doing. And you know, I watched a BBC documentary, so it didn't go very far. It was the BBC, but it was about Silicon Valley, what I call the devil's playground. And there was this sequence, I'll never forget it. It was a sequence of garage doors, right? So they had this sequence of garage doors in Silicon Valley, and the voiceover was saying, this technology was invented or discovered or whatever behind this garage door, and this company was discovered by this garage door, and this technology was behind this garage door, and I had this image of this elite sitting around a table saying, look, guys, too many garage doors, okay? Too many garage door cover stories. We need to get a bit more creative in the cover story. And why do I say cover story? Because much of this technology is not being invented and played out into the public arena on the basis of some nerd in Silicon Valley has just created it by chance. It's coming out of the underground bases, the DUMBs as they call them, the deep underground military bases, and other beyond top secret establishments like within mountains and stuff in America. It's coming from there. And what it's done, it's being played out in a sequence. So you get to this level of technology and you get people used to that, then you go to the next one, then you go to the next one. This stuff's been known all along. This is what people miss. So the idea that there's a group of people sitting around a table strumming their fingers saying, look, before we can move this control on, we need to invent the next stage. It doesn't happen like that. The next stage is already ready. That's why it's come out in such a sequence, and the sequence is getting quicker. And it's leading to what Ray Kurzweil, a Google executive, has said, and he said it openly because he's trying to give us the sales pitch that it will make us superhuman. It won't, it will make us subhuman. That by 2030, human brains will be connected to artificial intelligence through this technology, connected to the internet in this whole internet of everything, and that once the connection to artificial intelligence is made, AI will do more, these are his words, more and more of human thinking until human thought as we know now, human consciousness as we know now, is, in his words, virtually negligible. In other words, we will become AI. Instead of manipulating information to dictate perception, you give people their perceptions direct through AI. What are you thinking? I don't know. Well, whatever AI's thinking, I'm thinking. So this whole what's happening now is the end game in a long period of progression. So now we have this control of human perception, although many people are breaking away from it now more than ever before, but the great body of perception looks at technology and it sees it as a good thing. It lots of people stand in the middle of the early morning in queues, standing in line to get the latest stage of their imprisonment, and so they get the first one. We are now in a situation, for instance, with 5G. 5G is a massively important part of this process because of the nature of the frequency, and we have the programmed, perceptually controlled reaction to 5G, which is wonderful. We'll be able to download a movie in seconds. Ain't it great? But the streetwise level of 5G knows that actually it's part of this massive control system, which we are seeing built all around us, called the smart grid, where everything, including the human mind, is connected to a grid of smart technology and run by AI, and whoever controls the AI and the technology controls everything, including the human mind. So that's a very quick and brief kind of bit of dot connecting. It's not just a modern phenomenon. What's happening now is the outgrowth of something that's been unfolding for a very, very long time.
I agree. It's a plan that's been unfolding for a long, long time. But the realization of it, it's like slapping us in the face. And the thing that gets me more than anything, David, is how much we are asking for it, right? And you made reference to this technology coming from DARPA, coming from the military, like the iPhone by itself.
Yep.
GPS is a military technology. Siri is military technology.
Absolutely right.
Touch screens is military technology. And now, what got me more than anything is the Apple Watch. And you knew there was an agenda behind this, right? But now it's become completely clear with this heart signature reading device, because of the Apple Watch and Fitbits, all of this stuff. They take record of your heart palpitations and the whole deal, and they send this information somewhere. It's going to be sold, and they're going to know who we are, because it's a distinct signature per human.
Well, everything that we do and everywhere we go now is providing information to a central point, and it's not like a few decades ago where there's people in offices with ledgers and pencils or pens, kind of writing this stuff down and putting it in files and then trying to work out what its significance is. This information on an extraordinary scale is being processed and acted upon by AI second by second by second. And it's interesting you mentioned the Apple Watch, because there has been, going back to that sequence I talked about a few minutes ago, there's a very clear technological sequence here. First of all, they had to get the mass of the population addicted to technology so that they could pull them kitty, here, kitty, down the line towards AI control of the brain. So they start off with technology that people hold. It started off with just a phone. The first phones, of course, blimey, you needed a trolley to pull it along. It was so big. My brother had one, I remember, because he's a bus mechanic who gets called out. So he had one of the earlier ones, blimey, size of it. Like and the cost of it as well. It was unbelievable. But then you move through to the smart technology and the screens. And so you get people addicted to technology that they hold. Your goal is to get inside the body. And of course, addiction to smartphones is now unbelievable. I mean, I went for a walk this morning. I love walking in the countryside. It's just fantastic. I love it. It's a beautiful sunny day, and I'm walking through along this cycle path actually, and the sun's out and the birds are singing. It's just beautiful. And there's two people sitting on a bench on the side, and there were a couple of young kids. They must have been about, I don't know, 16, 17, and they were sitting there, and both of them were on the phone, looking at the screen, both of them. And I look around and I see this extraordinary beauty all around them, but all they can see is the phone. So the addiction to holdables, as they're called, is absolutely there. Then they moved to the next stage, which is one you've mentioned, what they call wearables. This is the Apple Watch and the Bluetooth and all the gadgets that they now produce to put on the body. So your goal is in the body. So you're getting closer, you're on the body now. And now, of course, they are going in the body. I spoke in Sweden last year. About thousands of people in Sweden have been microchipped. And some of them had parties to celebrate being microchipped.
Man, this is insane.
It's unbelievable. And because they're microchipped, they can open a door without pushing it. I mean, crikey. Lazy sods. I mean, what's all that about? But this is where the addiction goes. Now, the next stage, which is what Kurzweil and co are trying to sell, is if we want to be the next superhuman, godlike, as Kurzweil calls it, we need to be connected to AI. And then you've got people like Elon Musk, who a very kind of confused guy. Well, I say confused, and I'm giving the benefit of the doubt, where he came out some time ago and said that AI could be the end of humanity. Well, actually, end of humanity as we know it, 100% it could. And then he starts a company called Neuralink, which is connecting the human brain to AI or to technology. And he's putting up his SpaceX rockets, which are putting in orbit literally thousands and thousands of satellites that are beaming Wi-Fi, 5G ultimately, at the Earth, so no one can escape from it. This is all part of this smart grid. And so Elon Musk is apparently the opposite to Kurzweil. He's saying it's not a good thing, but he's still playing a part in making it happen. So these are how the dots connect. And so if you look at your car now, or anything you do, smart meters, all of it, wherever you go, these are trawling information from your activities of various kinds, and it's all going into a massive AI database where that information is processed so that on tap they can know anything about you. And of course, there's another question, which is, what is AI? I mean, we see AI everywhere, AI this, artificial intelligence that, but what is it? What is it? I mean, you have algorithmic AI, these are codes, that's fair enough. Then you have learning AI, which is kind of learning from this. This is the point, this vast amount of information about humanity and human behavior and human emotions and human reactions and human activities. It's not just pouring into a central point to be processed into surveillance and all that stuff. It's actually being absorbed by AI, and AI is learning from it all the time, second by second. So there's that learning AI. But then there's another level of AI I say exists, which is, I believe and contend, that level of AI is this force that's been manipulating this all along. And once that force has technological access to the human mind, it can trawl that, assimilate that consciousness into itself. I don't want to kind of frighten people, but the point being, if we don't get the whole 9 yards of what's going on, then there's no way that anyone's going to do anything about it. And we'll go on sleepwalking into this. And what I'm making this information available for to people is to give them a chance to see actually the world's not like they thought it was. The reason for A, B, C, D, E in human society is not what they're telling you it is. And there are 7.7 billion of us, and there are a handful of them in full knowledge of what they're doing. And if we become informed about what they're doing and how they're doing it, then we can do something about it. Because if we don't know it's happening, one thing's for sure, we ain't going to do anything about it.
It's a crazy thing, David. We have to let everybody know what's going on, and most people don't care. That's the sad part, because it's an addiction that has been created to the AI, right? People, like you said, they're on the phone, and people are right next to them, or nature's all around them, and they don't care. They're on their phone. Elon Musk, you mentioned him. He recently is talking about occupying Mars. And it's funny. It's funny because he is the guy that says, AI is a problem, but yet he is instrumental in pushing AI.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have some type of issues with Elon Musk. You spoke about the Google exec, I forget his name.
Kurzweil.
Wouldn't
trust him to tell me the time in a room full of clocks, mate.
Absolutely not. He's been wanting to live forever for a long time. I think he took about 97 or 98 pills a day or something.
I know.
And he says,
when does he take them all?
What was that?
You must shovel them down in, a pint glass or something.
It's insane. And he says there won't be a God, or there hasn't been a God until he becomes God, right?
Yeah.
And then we got this guy, Gordy Rose, who recently I heard an interview with him, and he says, I am not for the weaponizing of AI. I can't weaponize it. First off, I think once you give AI intelligence, you're weaponizing it. That's just me.
Well, this is the point. They've already weaponized it.
Exactly.
More and more military technology and weapons are being AI controlled, not human controlled. We're moving to the point where AI decides who lives and dies.
Yeah, it's crazy. Go ahead, continue. Elaborate on that point.
Well, I've been talking for nearly 30 years now about the basic structure that they want. First of all, a world government dictating to every community worldwide. They want an end of countries. That's why all this we must have open borders stuff is all about, because if you have open borders, you have no countries. And this agenda wants no countries because it wants a world government dictating to everybody. And then super states under the world government like the European Union. And then under that, just like administrative regions instead of countries, the administrative regions that have no power. So that's the whole world government thing. They want a world army that imposes the will of the world government on anybody that doesn't want to accept it, and they want a world currency. I mean, you look at my books back in the early 90s, I was talking about the plan is for a cashless society where you basically will have one world cashless digital currency. We're moving towards that so fast. And a world central bank dictating all finance in the world, and a population connected through technology to a global computer system. I was writing this in the early 1990s, and then you look at it. So this is the structure, and this is the reason I say that, not just because that's important information, but the world army is not meant, in the end, to be human. It's meant to be AI. Yeah. And so you're seeing this now movement. And who's behind this? DARPA, that is developing this technology through its subdivisions like Google and the internet giants of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is owned by the Pentagon, and the Pentagon's owned by someone else that I'm going to reveal in the next book, which I've just finished. But the whole point of the World Army is that it will be an AI army, and that's why we're seeing more and more technology, military technology, and technology that's already in circulation being transformed into an AI version. The AI will control everything. And I would say to people, if you really want an extreme visual example of where this is going, then watch the Matrix movies, particularly the first one. The machines that controlled humanity by feeding off the energy of humanity. I've been pointing out in my books now for decades that this force that I'm talking about, that's ultimately not human, feeds off human low vibrational energy. Energy that is generated by low vibrational mental and emotional states. Joy, love, they can't absorb that because they're not in its frequency. Otherwise, they won't be doing what they're doing. So they want people in states of depression, fear, anxiety, anger, hatred, all these low vibrational emotional states. And then we become, as in the Matrix movie, Morpheus held up the battery and said, the machines have turned humans into one of these. We are actually empowering this force with our low vibrational emotional and mental states, which are manipulated by the way that society is structured. I mean, look at a war. I mean, it's a banquet of low vibrational states, a war. Because of the suffering and people who lose loved ones. I mean, it's just extraordinary explosion of low vibrational energy. So the Matrix movies were very much a symbol of what I'm talking about. And more than that, they're a symbol of something else. That basically this reality is some form of simulation. That's absolutely what I've been saying for a long, long time. In fact, Elon Musk has come out and said he thinks it's a simulation. But it's certainly the evidence is that it's a simulation which we've been attached to. And it's manipulating us in ways that we don't realize. But again, human consciousness in its awake form is more powerful than any technology.
Beautiful.
And thus, they have to keep us in an asleep form so that technology can dominate. Once you awaken from the program, and it's not about some, seeking enlightenment. We are enlightened. That's the point. The reason that we act as if we're not is our perceptions are programmed, not least through the sense of limitation. I can't, and it's not possible, to stop us, to put us in a frequency level of emotional and mental awareness that is too low for us to be influenced by our high vibrational self, which lies beyond the program. So when we have this situation where we're talking about people waking up, and my goodness me, they are. I've never seen anything like it. People that operate in just regular society and see mainstream information sources, they may think, there's no one waking up. It's not. It is when you travel the world, you see it everywhere. But what is waking up? It's just waking up from the program. It's just reaching that point of self-perception and a greater understanding of self-identity where the program stops thinking for you. Yeah. See, at the moment we have this perceptual program thinking for us, which is the sum total of lifelong programming of perception via control of information. And they want to go to the next stage, which is, again, control of perception via AI. So the answer is staring us in the face, staring us in the mind, staring us in the consciousness. But it's the program, perceptual program, what we call the norms of society, which are taught in the schools, they're taught in the universities, the colleges, they're pounded out 24/7 by the mainstream media. They are repeated by peer pressure around you from people who've been through the system and bought it and taken the program. Program people insisting that non-program people conform to the program. All this is going on. But all along, all through it, we can wake up from it. And if enough people wake up from it, then the world that depends on that program cannot manifest. But we better do it damn quick, that's for sure.
Yeah, you gave an example one time, a long time ago, that always stuck with me. If you take a rubber ball and put it in a fish tank, it's going to rise to the top all the time, and that's humanity. And the AI or whomever the controlling beings are have to keep it down by force.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, it's going to pop right back up, and that, I think, sums it up beautifully. I want to shift gears real quick.
Okay.
In the interest of time. So you got banned from Australia, and you came to the States, and you were going to premiere your film in LA, and that didn't go down either on some nonsense. And when you came to New York, it was a wild goose chase for a little bit.
Yeah, you know when you're making progress, and
Yeah.
you know when you're on the right track, when that which you're exposing is desperate to silence you. And let's just analyze this a second on the basis of what we've just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
This cabal that operates from the shadows is, on the surface and in its own writings, incredibly arrogant and incredibly sure of its own omnipotence and power. However, that doesn't scan me being banned from Australia, because here I am, there's 25 million people in Australia, and I am one person. That which I'm exposing has control of the entirety of the media virtually in Australia. It has control of government and politics, control of corporations, and control of all these elements of society that dictate society and dictate human perception in that society. It has control of all that. But it is so terrified of information that it would ban at 4 hours notice, 4 hours from my flight leaving from LA to start the tour, which cost us £30,000. It's about $50,000. I got a visa to speak in September 2018. The Ministry of Immigration had no problem. They couldn't have a problem. I've been 10 times. There never has been a problem, which the minister, a guy called David Coleman, had to admit in his missive banning me that there'd never been a problem in the 10 times I've been before. So obviously it's nothing to do with me. It was said in this document that I failed to pass the character test. Well, it's funny, I seem to have passed it a few months earlier, and then 4 hours before my plane left, suddenly I didn't, and nothing's changed in the meantime. But here's a minister who bans me at 4 hours notice, hence losing all that cost of putting the tour on. And he's obviously under pressure from other forces to do it. And he thinks that I'm a danger to Australia, or that which was behind the decision in truth thought I was a danger to Australia, when I'm one man against that great mountain of corporations and governments and organizations and banking systems and media operations, and yet they're terrified of me coming into Australia, talking in 6 cities and going home. 2 of the reasons that they gave were my views on human-caused global warming, which I say is a hoax for transforming society, using that as the excuse, and vaccines. Now, Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical cartel, can say what it likes about its product virtually and its vaccines. And yet one guy coming in and saying, maybe we should question this stuff, and here's why, is banned. So what that tells you, and it also was good in this way, a lot of people in Australia who didn't realise just how controlled their society was, suddenly realised how controlled their society was. 25 million Australians were told that they couldn't hear this stuff because the system is terrified of them hearing it. Why? Because they know, and it's been my experience as well, that when the way things are is communicated to people, it makes so much sense to them about why the world is as it is and what's going on, that it awakens them from the program. That's what they're terrified of. You know, I mean, in their own writings that have come to light from time to time, this cabal talks about this is my kind of summary of what it says, that basically mavericks are our biggest problem. They're terrified of mavericks, people who won't be labelled, they won't conform, who won't concede to fear of the consequences of speaking truth in a world of suppression and lies. They're the people they're terrified of. Why? Because they won't be intimidated into not speaking the truth. And what they're trying to do now, and to a very large extent, this explosion of censorship is not just arrogance, we'll censor what we like. It's also panic. Because there was a period, and there had to be, when the internet, once it had been created by DARPA, it had to become, in this agenda's sequence, the central pillar of human society. Now, to do that, you're not going to sell that to a population on the basis of the censorship we have now. They're just going to say, oh, you can stick it, basically. Or lots of people would. So you had to have the free flow of information to pull people in. You had to have the free flow of information and no censorship with Facebook and Google, so that they could reach a point of near monopoly. And once that was reached, the internet, the central pillar irreversibly of human society, Facebook and Google and these others, Apple, Amazon, at near monopolistic states of control, then, which is why it's happening now, they've kicked in the censorship because that's what was meant to be all along. But in that period of the free flow of information, so many people started to see what they hadn't seen before, that to a large extent this clampdown on the free flow of information is panic. They're trying to cut off the source as fast as possible and as completely as possible, the source of information that's had such an impact on so many people. But, ladies and gentlemen of the cabal, the genie's out of the bottle, and no matter what you do, it ain't going back.
Well, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you touched on vaccinations, and that's where I wanted to go. Here in New York City, in New York State, don't know if you're aware, but very recently, as I think it was last week, Andrew Cuomo, who is our governor here, has revoked religious exemptions for vaccinations here in NYC. And I think that's one of the main reasons, well, you mentioned it, that's one of the main reasons they gave for getting banned from Australia.
Yeah.
Because they don't want this type of information out.
No, they don't.
So even, what is it? I forget the name of the company. It's something monkey that sends out mail via the internet,
right,
about information. They decided to stop anything vaccine, anti-vaccine related. So they're clamping down on this information. What is the deal, in your opinion, with these vaccines? What's the deal with this? Why do they want everyone vaccinated?
Well, there's multiple reasons for it. And yes, I am absolutely aware of what's happened in New York. I'm also aware of what's happening in so many other states of America, not least California. While a Californian senator, let's have a quick drink. I've had a bit of a cough this week. Called Senator Richard Pan, a doctor, who's taken funding from Big Pharma, was the central player in getting basically compulsory vaccination in California. In Australia, they're doing it in stepping stones. And one of the things they've done in Australia is to say if you're on government benefits and you don't have your children vaccinated according to the government schedule, your benefits are cut. This is the level it's gone to. And they're talking about compulsory vaccination, some politicians are, in Britain and many, many other countries. And they go on about measles, right? And it's measles. It's we're all gonna die. Listen, I was brought up in the 1950s, and these childhood diseases like measles and chickenpox were just part of growing up. What they did was kick in a still developing immune system to develop it to greater power. When you had measles, it was like, God, we're going to have a week off school. Isn't it great? Oh, you might feel too well for a week, but, you know, you got a week off school. You could watch what you wanted or do what you wanted and all that stuff. You got waited on, you know, as a kid. It was like, well, this is all right there, so I don't usually get this. But now it's like, we're all going to die. And this is how, again, perception is manipulated. So they say, we need compulsory vaccination. Why? Well, it's herd immunity. Or you mean herd mentality? That's what you mean. Herd immunity. Okay, well, how does that work? Well, we need everyone vaccinated so that we've got a herd immunity from the disease. Well, hold on a minute. Your vaccines create immunity to the disease, right? Yeah. So it's a case of the immune system plus the vaccine defending a person against the disease. Yeah. So why does it matter if anyone else has not been vaccinated? Why does it matter? Because it's a game between a vaccinated immune system and the disease. How does anyone else come into it who's not been vaccinated? And here's another question. How come when we have these outbreaks, large numbers of vaccinated people get the disease and many unvaccinated people don't? My two boys have not been vaccinated. They didn't get childhood diseases like that they're talking about. Why? Because their immune system was not compromised from the earliest age with a tidal wave, particularly in America, of toxic shite that stops the immune system developing to its true power. Now, that is one reason for vaccinations. Why do we have in America this explosion of vaccinations? Suddenly, because Capitol Hill gave the vaccination companies immunity from prosecution if anyone gets damaged by them. So suddenly they had nothing to lose, nor did they have any encouragement to produce anything safe because they couldn't be sued by it anyway. The only reason that you would produce absolutely safe substances without the fear of prosecution is if you had a smear of empathy for the people who were going to suffer the consequences of your products. And of course, one of the great empathy-deleted zones of human society is the pharmaceutical cartel, so they weren't going to be troubled by empathy. So suddenly we can put anything else we like, because we can't bloody lose, we can only make greater fortunes. And by the way, you know, when the vaccinations cause all these diseases and problems and imbalances in the body, yeah, well, we can sell them drugs for the problems the vaccines have created. This is what is happening. This is what is happening. I read a book recently by a guy called, what was his name? Richard Moskowitz. He's a doctor. He's a family doctor in America. It's called Vaccines, a Reappraisal. It's fantastic. And there's another book about vaccines by a lady, a doctor in America called Sherry Tenpenny, who was also banned from a speaking tour in Australia by the government because they absolutely don't want the truth about vaccines coming out. Other things that are kind of also now starting to emerge are the fact that these vaccinations are affecting DNA. And DNA is a receiver transmitter of information. This is well known at the cutting edge of science, especially in places like Russia, among Russian scientists. And thus, if you change DNA, you change the frequency of information which it receives and transmits. Thus, you affect the body and people psychologically by the changing nature of what the body-mind is interacting with. And that's another reason for vaccinations. And another reason is if you want to get something in the body, like nanotechnology microchips, which I was told was going to happen by a CIA scientist back in the 1990s, I'll tell you that story in a sec, then what better than a vaccination, a needle, to put in the body whatever you like. You look at some of the so-called should have been secret statements and documents by this cabal, and they talk about inoculating diseases in this way. And this story, it was 1996. I was in America, and I got asked through a third party to meet a guy who's a CIA scientist. He was in America. I won't say, well, I can say it was West Coast. And he invited me to his home because he wanted to tell me what he knew. And he told me that he was a scientist working for the CIA, and that he was doing it against his will because he joined the CIA, he said, because he thought he was serving his country. When he got inside and see what they wanted him to do, he realized he wasn't serving his country at all. He was serving this cabal. So he walked out and refused to work for them. And he was a kind of a genius in his particular area. And so they didn't want him to go. And they certainly didn't want him to go with the knowledge he had of what was really going on. So he said he woke up one morning and he left home after he's walked out. And he remembers nothing after that until he woke up on one of these medical type benches in a room. There's no one else there. And he had something stuck to his chest. And as he was telling me this story, he was opening his shirt and showing me it. And it was like a shampoo sachet, but it was see-through, kind of a plastic see-through sachet. And in it was this orangey golden liquid. And I said to him, what the bloody hell is that? He said, this is the patch. And he told me how what they do is they manipulate the body to require the drug in that patch to survive. And if the patch is not replaced, and it has to be replaced every 72 hours, then he starts to die. And he said there are thousands of scientists in America who are patched in these secret projects. And he said that he did try it once. He refused to work for them again, and he started to die a very horrible death. And then he agreed to renege on his, not renege, but to go back on, walking out again. And they repatched him, and he recovered. And he was the guy that told me, this is back in 1996, before nanotechnology was really talked about in any way in human society. He said they have technology in the shadows that's so small you will not even see it. It's beyond, tiny, totally invisible to the human eye. He was talking about nanotechnology, which years later became widespread. He said they are putting nanotechnology microchips into people during vaccination programs. Like I say, that was 1996. So, see, the thing is, once you get access to the body through a needle and you press this stuff in, who the heck knows what's in it? And even if you look at vaccines and what's in it, like a human and animal fetal material, aluminium, formaldehyde. I mean, what do they think that's going to do to the body? And this is why, in the vaccine era, particularly after the explosion of vaccines coming out of the immunity from lawsuit legislation, we've had an explosion in autoimmune disease, not least among kids, where the immune system attacks its own body. Because this stuff goes in the body and attaches to the body, the immune system sees it as a threat and responds to it, and in attacking the toxin, it attacks its own body to which the toxin is attached. This is where we get this explosion in the vaccine era from autism. These things are happening on a scale that people don't understand, because the mainstream media is not going to tell them, in this vaccine era, and it's the most blatant cause and effect. And if people read this book, Vaccines, a Reappraisal, they'll be shocked at what's actually going on, which they're not being told. And so they want to shut down exposure of it, which is what the censorship's about, and they want to shut down any challenge to the official story of vaccinations, so that people won't resist them. And it shows the scale of programming that you now have parents who've had their children vaccinated, God help them, who then attack and abuse parents who haven't as being a threat to their child. The threat's the other way round, because they have a phenomenon known as shedding, and that is when children or anybody that's been given a vaccination with the live virus sheds that live virus in a period after the inoculation, which other people pick up. They become carriers of the virus, in effect. That's what shedding is. And how many parents know that? They don't. And they don't want the parents to know it. That's where the censorship comes from.
Insane. It goes back to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here. It's pretty clever, but it's not very wise. It is just not very wise. We have no idea what we're doing. And in China very recently, and I'm sure you're aware of this, the quote-unquote first genetically gene-edited babies were born. Well,
Yeah.
what kind of havoc is that going to wreak on the rest of the population? Because apparently that's passed down.
Yes, it is. It is passed down. There's something else passed down. It's called epigenetics.
Yeah.
Epigenetics is when your environment, your chemical, electromagnetic environment, and your mental and emotional state, everything is a frequency. Every emotion's a frequency. Every thought's a frequency. Toxins are frequencies, and electromagnetic technologies are all frequencies. Of course, we see that, but everything's a frequency. And what happens is when you are in certain emotional, mental states, or you are affected by toxic frequencies or electromagnetic frequencies, it switches on and off the genetic structure of the body. And what's on has a effect mentally and psychologically and physically, and when it's off, it doesn't affect. And what's happening, not least with the smart technology and all the frequencies, but also the toxins and the fast food toxins and stuff like that, is they are switching on and off this genetic structure in a way that's never happened before. And it's known, this whole process, this phenomenon of switching them on and off, is known as epigenetics. And what prompts me to say that is your remark a few minutes ago about passing it on. Epigenetics does not have to change the body's hard drive, i.e. DNA, to be passed on to the next generation. What's passed on through procreation is the epigenetic state of the parents. This is why you're having more and more children with a far greater aptitude for weight gain than they did before. But when I go back to the 1950s, when I was a kid, you didn't see many overweight people. You virtually saw no obese people. There would have been some, but not many. But that's all changed, and the children are now having a greater attitude to it because they've inherited the epigenetic on-off genetic structure that gives a greater aptitude to weight gain. So this is what's happening, and deep in the shadows, they know what these effects are, and they're doing it because they want those effects. You go into your general medical profession and your general professions, they just carry out orders and do things that are called the norm in their particular area of operation. But they don't know what they're actually doing. But deep in the shadows, they sure as heck do. The people putting the vaccine into the body might know not what they're doing. And the people that make the vaccines and make the needles might not know what they're doing. But who's deciding what goes in the vaccines? They know exactly what they're doing. And it takes only a tiny few people to control the whole sequence of events in which most people in that sequence are absolutely clueless of what they're actually doing.
Agreed 100%. David, we're about to ride out of here.
Okay, mate.
I'm going to ask you one more thing. Donald Trump. This guy, man, here in the United States, there are a lot of people that think he is that dude, that he's the savior, that he is the God King that's going to come. And there's a whole thing going on that I'm sure you're aware about, that they say that he's fighting back the cabal and fighting the deep state and a bunch of nonsense like that. In my particular opinion, David, what do you think of Donald?
Well, I think about him now what I said about him during the election campaign. That I said a number of times on the internet in the election campaign in 2016 that basically asking the question, what on earth are great swathes of the alternative media doing supporting him? First of all, it's not the role of the alternative media to support politicians of particular parties or whatever. It's the role of the alternative media, in my view, to expose the corruption and the rigged nature of the system. A rigged system, so rigged that it doesn't matter who gets into the White House, the same cabal are in control. And in my film Renegade, which people can get to watch anytime they like via davidicke.com, and it's coming out, I think it's today as we speak. There's a rental version, so you can rent it and watch it. You don't have to actually buy it. So in Renegade, which kind of, it was a fly on the wall. It followed me through my life and talks and stuff and like that. And I was delighted with the outcome of it. It's been very, very well received. And there's a sequence in Renegade where I'm going through the Bush administration, Boy Bush, Obama and Trump, and showing the fundamental connections between them and how they're just following the same sequence that was put into place in the year 2000 before Bush came to power. Well, Bush came to the illusion of power. And so this is why when Trump won the election, I posted on the internet at that time, key word in the Trump administration, Iran, because I knew what the sequence was, and I knew he wasn't different. Trump is owned by Israel. He's surrounded by Israel agents, especially his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who's a lifelong friend of Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu used to sleep in his bed at the family home when he was a kid, because Netanyahu was a close friend of Kushner's father, who went to jail for fraud. And then you've got David Friedman, the former Trump bankruptcy lawyer, who's now the US ambassador, actually the Israeli ambassador to Israel, who oversaw the moving of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That has fundamental implications, symbolic and literal, for Palestinian hopes of their own country, their own state. And so the Iran deal, which has led to this all stuff kicking off with Iran, which had all calmed down because of the Iran nuclear deal, that was dropped by Trump at the behest of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu was caught on a camera or recording, not knowing he was, who was saying outwardly that he was the reason that the Iran deal was dropped. I mean, Israel is a country of 8 million people, right? Why is it dictating to the American president? Because they own him. So this idea that Trump's the savior, I mean, forget it. And what they've done is this. They've taken Trump, because he's so bombastic and narcissistic, he gives the impression of being in control. And so what they do is they take the things that Trump wants, that they want, or things that Trump will accept that they want to happen, and they happen. But things that Trump might want that they don't want, then they block them. So I think that Trump genuinely didn't see the reason for a big bust-up with Russia. But so the moment he won, the Russiagate thing started to accuse him of, manipulating the election with the Russians. And that meant that he wasn't going to get close to Russia until that was through, which was years past, in which he became very much almost in historic proportions, someone who was imposing sanctions, etc., on Russia. And he I think he genuinely wanted to shore up the southern border. That's why he came up with the wall. So, but the Democrat and a good chunk of the Republican wing of this one-party state has blocked that, because that's something Trump may have wanted, but the cabal don't want, because they want open borders. So Trump is a pawn like everyone else, and in no way is he a savior. The reason he pulled back, there was talk about Tucker Carlson, who I think does a very good job. He is willing to ask questions on the one Fox show that's worth watching. He does ask questions that other people won't ask, whether it's MSNBC or CNN or whatever. They won't ask him. He does, and whatever people think of him, that's proper journalism. And it was said that when Trump stopped the attack on Iran with minutes to go, that it was because of Tucker Carlson. Well, I saw the show they were talking about. I watch Carlson every morning when I get up about 5 o'clock in the morning. I watch his show on YouTube. Gets me up to date with what's happening in America in a large extent every day.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like that.
Yeah, and I watched that show, and this is what basically Carlson laid out. If Trump attacks Iran, he's got no chance of winning the next election, because he will so alienate people that voted for him last time on the basis that he said he wouldn't do things like that, that he's no chance of winning the election. I think it was personal preservation that made him think. But what they're going to do, I don't think he really wants to attack Iran. I don't think he does. But he's under tremendous pressure to do so from this cabal around him. And another Israel agent of massive proportions, John Bolton, his national security advisor. What's your national security advice, Mr. Bolton? Bomb anyone Israel wants bombed, Mr. President. Oh, thank you very much. And so you have a situation where he doesn't really want it, but what they're going to do is drop more and more events blamed on Iran to basically break down Trump's resistance to the point where he says, "Okay, I don't want to, but go for it." That's how I read the situation. Whether they'll achieve that, we'll see, but they're going to try. Because that's attacking Iran, a war with Iran, has been on the list of regime change in the Middle East by this Israel-controlled cabal in America since September 2000, a document that was produced listing the countries, which were Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, North Korea, and eventually China. So it all fits the pattern. And if Trump goes against them, or goes against too many things that they want, they'll make sure he doesn't win the next election. And they'll bring in some moronic person, because Tulsi Gabbard apart, that's all these Democratic presidential candidates are, moronic. Tulsi Gabbard stands out like a shining light because A, she's intelligent, and B, she doesn't want wars in the Middle East. That's why they're all turning against her. But they'll bring some moronic person, some yes person in to replace him, because this is the point. It's not here today, gone tomorrow politicians that dictate events and dictate the direction of the world. It's the permanent government that's always there that ultimately controls the here today, gone tomorrow politicians. That's how it works. And therefore, if we get focused on the here today, gone tomorrow, we become our attention becomes misdirected from what we should be looking at, which is what is always there. It's what is always there that controls the world, not what's here and then goes.
Well, beautiful, David. Beautiful. Listen, it's been an honor having you on. Thank you for making time.
No problem.
Me. Really appreciate it. Not that you need it, but go ahead and tell everyone where they can find you and what you got going on. And Renegades, I had a chance to see it, like I mentioned in the beginning of the interview, and excellent, absolutely excellent film. I suggest that everybody go take a look. Go ahead, David.
It's gone down fantastically well with everyone who's seen it. And what's given me great encouragement is the number of people who told me that they took people along, family, friends, who weren't into this information at all, and the effect the movie had on them. Because it's in a very, as you know, it's in a very easily digestible form. So they can go to davidicke.com, and through that they can watch the movie whenever they like. They can watch it now if they like, and they can rent it after. I think that point in the day has passed where it's now available for rent. And the other thing I've done, I just finished a book. It's coming out on September the 11th, which might give you a clue of some of the content. It's basically two books in one. It demolishes the official story of 9/11 in the first part, and in the second half, it reveals who actually did it. It wasn't 19 hijackers, according to the official story, and in exposing 9/11 as it really was, and especially in exposing who did it, the whole vista of global control is also revealed. So it's a massive work. It's called The Trigger, and it's going to be available for pre-order right at the start of August, and will be officially published on September the 11th. And I mean, to call it explosive is like saying a pop gun makes a bit of a noise. You know what I mean? It's seriously explosive, and I'll be demonized by many sources because of it, who will lie about its content. But so be it. I'm doing this because I want to find out what the truth is. I'm not interested in a round of applause and a statue very much, very much at all.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what's going on and communicating it. So throw what they will. I don't care. This is a time when this has to come out, and it will.
It will. It absolutely will. And I'm going to close by saying this. I remember, and I told you this in the beginning, 2005, my son was born, and I had Alice in Wonderland and the World Trade Center disasters in front of me by David Icke, and sitting there reading it next to my little boy. It was very close to September 11th, and felt the need to go down there, and I've been down there every year since on September 11th, trying to spread, some type of information to people. I got you the credit for that in large part, David, so I really appreciate it. Like I said before, it really means a lot. Thank you for coming on the Infinite Fringe. I want you to hold on for just a second. Listen, a lot of this conversation mapped out some of the things that are going on, but the one thing that I want everybody to take from this is that you are special, and you can do way more than you've been led to believe. We are special, special human people.
Yeah, we've just been manipulated to forget. We've been manipulated to forget.
Absolutely.
Remember who you are, and everything follows from that.
Absolutely. Say goodbye, David.
Cheers then. All the best. Been a real pleasure talking to you, mate.